Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, February 13th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 26 of the ceasefire after 15 months of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll speak with our contributor Abubaker Abed, who has been traveling across Gaza in recent weeks to show us some of the video he's filmed and to talk about what he's been seeing. And later on in the program, Jon will be looking into the details around the fifth exchange of prisoners from Saturday in Deir al-Balah, as well as the ongoing resistance in the northern occupied West Bank. But first, here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Gaza and the West Bank. Since the January 19th ceasefire in Gaza, Israel has violated the ceasefire in a myriad of ways, including by withholding the amounts of aid, fuel, and medical deliveries agreed upon under the ceasefire terms, restricting people's freedom of movement, and by continuing to attack and kill Palestinians. Euromed Human Rights Monitor reported that, quote, despite the declaration of a ceasefire, Israel continues to commit genocide in the Gaza Strip by denying Palestinians the basic necessities for survival and imposing conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction. The rights group added that more than 100 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire came into effect, including some who died from previous injuries during Israel's genocidal attacks, and at least 900 have been injured. On February 10th, Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson for Al-Qassam Brigades, the military wing of the Hamas political party, announced that the planned release of Israeli captives would be postponed indefinitely unless Israel fulfilled its obligations and stopped its ceasefire violations. Hamas officials then submitted a report to mediators on February 11th, listing 269 field violations by the Israeli military since the ceasefire, as well as the ongoing denials of aid and fuel deliveries. Also included on the list were several political violations, including statements by Israeli lawmakers urging for the expulsion of Gaza's population, and the ways Israeli prison authorities were subjecting Palestinian captives to assault and violence upon their release during the exchanges. Israeli lawmakers then accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire, and U.S. President Donald Trump insinuated that Israel should cancel the ceasefire if the Israeli captives aren't released, and that he'd allow, quote, all hell to break loose otherwise. But even the Israeli military admitted in Hebrew media that Hamas had not violated the terms. Trucks filled with fuel, medical supplies, tents, caravans, heavy machinery, and food have been set to enter the Gaza Strip, but it is unclear when these necessary supplies will arrive as agreed upon. Israeli forces officially withdrew from the Netzarim corridor beginning on February 8th. And the next day, Agence France-Presse and the Times of Israel jointly reported that a Gaza government official said, quote, Israeli forces have dismantled their positions and military posts and completely withdrawn their tanks from the Netzarim corridor on Salah ad-Din Road, allowing vehicles to pass freely in both directions. An AFP journalist on the scene said there were no Israeli troops present on the corridor. The Al Jazeera Arabic channel filmed footage of the wreckage left behind by the Israeli military after it withdrew from the Netzarim corridor. In a statement, the Hamas political party said, quote, the withdrawal of the Zionist occupation army from the Netzarim axis is a victory for the will of our people. Turning to the healthcare situation in Gaza, Caroline Seguin, the emergency coordinator for Doctors Without Borders, stated from northern Gaza on Wednesday that, quote, in the North Governorate, the level of destruction is total. It's a flat land. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Our Palestinian colleagues are no longer able to recognize their own neighborhoods. Some were in shock. Others literally collapsed. Seguin added that, quote, in Gaza City, we were already shocked by the level of destruction, but then we went north to Jabalia. We couldn't say a word. There is nothing there anymore, only ruins and the smell of death everywhere because of the dead bodies still trapped under the rubble. In the north, she said, there is no health system anymore. Quote, Kamal Adwan Hospital has been razed, while Al-Shifa, Al-Auda, and Indonesian hospitals are seriously damaged and only partially functioning. We were utterly shocked to observe that in Indonesian hospital, every medical machine seemed to have been deliberately destroyed. They were smashed to pieces one by one to make sure no medical care could be provided anymore. You have to ask, what is the motivation of such action? These machines are made to save people's lives, mothers, fathers, children. It's devastating to see the state of these hospitals. And an update on the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who was abducted by the Israeli military on December 27th, along with his colleagues, medical staff, patients, and their companions. As we reported last week, Abu Safiya was still prohibited by the Israeli prison authorities any access to a lawyer as he remains in administrative detention at Ofer military prison. This week, Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights stated that on Tuesday, February 11th, after 47 days of arbitrary detention, Abu Safiya met his lawyer for the first time since his abduction from Gaza. Al-Mizan said, quote, Al-Mizan's lawyer visited Dr. Abu Safiya in Ofer prison, located in the unlawfully occupied West Bank. During the visit, Dr. Abu Safiya detailed the various forms of torture and abuse to which he has been subjected both during his unlawful arrest and throughout his arbitrary detention by Israeli forces and authorities. When he was captured from Gaza and transferred to the Sde Teiman military detention camp, he was subjected to various forms of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment, methods that are emblematic of Israeli mass arrest operations in Gaza. He reported being forcibly stripped, having his hands tightly shackled, and being made to sit on sharp gravel for approximately 5 hours by Israeli forces. He was also subjected to severe physical abuse, including beatings with batons and electric shock sticks, as well as repeated blows to the chest. In Ofer prison, where he was transferred on January 9th, he was held in solitary confinement for 25 days, a period so prolonged as to constitute a form of torture in itself. During this time, he endured nearly continuous interrogation for 10 days. At one point, he lost consciousness in his cell due to severe breathing difficulties. During interrogation, Dr. Abu Safiya was confronted with accusations that he firmly denied, stressing that he is a doctor whose sole duty is to provide medical care to patients and the wounded. He also reported a severe decline in his health, with his weight dropping 12 kilograms in less than 2 months, further evidence of Israel's systematic starvation policies against Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Additionally, he disclosed that he suffers from heart muscle enlargement. Despite repeatedly requesting medical attention from Israeli authorities, he has been systematically denied access to a specialist examination and deprived of essential care, further endangering his already deteriorating condition. Al-Mizan unequivocally condemns the torture and other grave human rights abuses inflicted upon Dr. Abu Safiya by Israeli forces and authorities. Al-Mizan urged the so-called international community, particularly Israel's enabling allies, quote, to take immediate action to demand the immediate and unconditional release of Dr. Abu Safiya, as well as of all Palestinians who have been unlawfully arrested and arbitrarily detained by Israeli authorities, including hundreds of healthcare workers. In a statement, Hussam Abu Safiya's family said that there is, quote, a possibility of his release in the coming stages, as there are no charges against him from the Israeli public prosecution. He urges the world to help secure his release and the release of all detained healthcare personnel from all hospitals. They must be protected, their rights ensured, and they should receive care and be released as soon as possible. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of As One War Ends, Another Begins by English teacher and translator Saida Hamdouna, writing from Gaza. She writes, quote, Israel's overt assault on Gaza has ended, at least for now. The sounds of planes and whistles of shells have stopped, as have the moments of sheer terror and hiding from Israel's attacks. But the ceasefire has left behind a new life no less harsh than the war itself. It is a life filled with daily challenges, as though Israel never dropped its weapons, replacing them with battles that creep into all aspects of life. Now the people of Gaza are enduring a new struggle, a struggle to search for a life worth living amid the rubble of homes, disfigured streets, and dreams buried beneath the debris. It is a war of patience and perseverance in the absence of any clear reconstruction plans. There are no quick solutions, only people fighting to survive and refusing to surrender to ruin. Imagine attempting to leave your home, only to find that the road before you is nothing but wreckage. Streets that once buzzed with activity and life are now a maze of rubble and craters. The streets are no longer navigable. Even the drivers of ambulances and humanitarian aid struggle to reach devastated neighborhoods. The simplest daily tasks, like walking to a store or visiting a relative, have become huge challenges. Rubble is not just shattered stones. It is a silent testimony to a war that left profound marks on every corner and in every street. Restoring these roads could take years, maybe even generations. Despite all this destruction and pain, Gaza continues to resist. Each day is a battle to find water, to access electricity, to remove rubble, and the even greater battle to rebuild the self and assert our human dignity. Life in Gaza after the war is not easy, but there is a deep belief that all this pain will one day be a distant memory. With determination, we will rebuild everything that has been destroyed, not only in the streets, but also in our hearts. The road forward is long and arduous, but this land, which has paid a heavy price time and again, will return to life once more. The people of Gaza do not know the meaning of the impossible, nor will we accept Israel's destruction as the end. That's an excerpt from Saida Hamdona's feature, As One War Ends, Another Begins, on electronicintifada.net. Turning to the occupied West Bank, my colleague Tamara Nassar reports that Israel's ongoing deadly assaults has nearly emptied several refugee camps, specifically in the northern areas. The following is from her report, Israel is Establishing Facts on the Ground in the West Bank, published on Wednesday. Some 40,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced since Israel's military operation, dubbed Iron Wall, launched in the northern Jenin refugee camp on January 21st. Since then, Israel expanded its assault to 𝐓𝐿 refugee camp and Nur Shams refugee camp near 𝐓𝐿, also in the north. Al-Farah refugee camp in the foothills of the Jordan Valley, south of Tubas, was also targeted. UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, said that the deadly and destructive assault, quote, is now the single longest in the West Bank since the Second Intifada. Israel's operation follows a series of assaults on refugee camps in the occupied West Bank, which have left them uninhabitable, according to UNRWA, forcing their residents into a state of cyclical displacement. This was a spillover of the war in Gaza, the agency said. Tamara writes that since January 21st, the Israeli army has carried out invasions and airstrikes, destroyed critical infrastructure such as electricity, sewage, and water lines, raided homes, arrested youth, and deployed snipers in residential areas. Nearly 50 Palestinians have been killed in those areas and over 100 have been injured. Israel is doing this under the guise of crushing armed resistance that emerged in those areas to confront Israel's colonization and theft of Palestinian land. Schools for Palestinian children in 𝐓𝐿, its refugee camp, and the Jenin area were forced to close as a result of the ongoing Israeli assault. Israeli forces imposed a siege on 2 hospitals in 𝐓𝐿, disrupting medical care, particularly for kidney dialysis patients. On February 9th, Israeli forces opened fire on a young couple in a car as they were leaving their home in the Nur Shams refugee camp. The attack killed 23-year-old Sundus Jamal Shalabi, who was pregnant and in her final trimester, and left her husband critically injured, according to a field investigation by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. Israeli forces then obstructed the movement of medics and ambulances for approximately 1 hour. delaying medical assistance. Doctors were unable to save Sundus's unborn child. For much more, read Tamara Nassar's report, Israel is establishing facts on the ground in the West Bank on electronicintifada.net. And in occupied East Jerusalem, the owners of the educational bookshop were arrested and detained on February 9th after Israeli police raided both of their stores in the city and threw books on the floor, accusing the owners of selling items that, quote, incite terrorism, including a children's coloring book titled From the River to the Sea. The owners, Mahmoud and Ahmed Muna, were released on Tuesday, and according to their lawyer, the Israeli court charged them with disrupting public order and ordered that they be placed under house arrest for 5 days. The court also ordered them not to be allowed to return to their bookstores for 20 days. Finally, as we always do, we wanted to share images of people expressing determination and resilience in the aftermath of Israel's 15-month campaign of destruction. A group of kids sitting around a campfire in Jabalia in northern Gaza spoke with journalist Anas al-Sharif about U.S.-Israeli aspirations to expel them to other countries and take over Gaza. Every time Anas asked the kids if they're thinking about leaving the north of Gaza, they all shout in unison, "No. Let Trump bark all he wants," one of the kids says. "We're not leaving."
مفكرين تطلعوا؟ طب هلقيت ترامب بيقول لنا في تهجير بدكم تطلعوا من الشمال ومن غزة. ناويين تطلعوا؟ لا. بدكم تطلعوا من جباليا؟ لا. يعني زعق براحته بدناش نطلع. بدكم مش تطلعوا؟ لا يا بنت حزامات نارية في غزة بدناش نطلع. ايه؟ لا يضرب حزامات نارية في غزة بدناش نطلع. لا يضرب حزامات نارية مش طالعين؟ كل واحد يضرب بنطلع كلنا على الله فوق. يعني كلمة أخيرة.
That's Anas al-Sharif speaking to kids in Jabalia. That's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. It's good to see you again, and thank you for that report. There is always so much happening, and we can only scratch the surface.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always a struggle. It's triage every week.
Yeah. And I was really touched by the feature you read that the battles now for people in Gaza invade every aspect of life. And I'm just so conscious, the thing that I can't stop thinking about, it has been so cold and rainy in the region for the past 2 weeks. It's been relentless. And that's the thing I just can't imagine having to deal with no shelter, no source of heat. And probably very few sources of heat. It's just really unbearable.
Yeah, it is unbearable. And as we said in the news, I mean, those trucks have been lined up waiting to enter, since the beginning of this genocide.
Trucks have been coming in. We just before the program we tried to check the latest numbers from UNRWA up to February 9th, and the number of trucks coming in has definitely increased. They say up to 600 a day, whereas before the ceasefire it was typically below 100 a day. But it's still far below what's needed. And the thing that hasn't come in yet, there have been images circulating on social media, is the heavy equipment, the mobile homes. You remember last week that we talked with Asa Winstanley of the Gaza municipality of how difficult it is for them to do anything without the heavy equipment. And that's just not coming in yet. The mobile homes, the caravans, or these are really prefabricated huts, are still not coming in. They're stacked up at the border. Israel is delaying them, and they haven't come in. But our next guest is here now. We were just waiting for him to connect. So we're going to hear more about all of this. I guess I should go ahead and introduce him, right?
Go ahead.
All right. So Well, just a reminder that you're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. And as you've just heard, it's been more than 3 weeks since the Gaza ceasefire and prisoner exchange deal took effect. In that time, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, at least 118 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza by direct Israeli fire, died due to prior injuries, or from the thousands of tons of unexploded Israeli ordnance that litters the territory. Meanwhile, the official death toll, widely considered to be an undercount, has risen to more than 62,000 as people across Gaza return to their shattered communities and find the remains of loved ones whose fate had been unknown. One person who has been traveling across Gaza in recent weeks is Electronic Intifada contributor Abubaker Abed, and we're delighted, of course, to have him join us now from Gaza to talk about the current situation and show us some of the videos he's been filming. Abubaker, are you with us?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes,
how are you?
See me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you.
We see you, we hear you, and we couldn't be happier to see you and hear you.
Thank you so much. I have the same feelings, to be honest.
Wonderful. So, Abubaker, you have been very busy in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to get into some of the videos that you have been filming and posting. We just heard on the news report, I don't know if you were able to watch it, some of the kids in Gaza responding to the idea of being forcibly displaced from Gaza and being sent, whether it's to Jordan or Egypt or Indonesia or Somalia, or I don't know what other countries they've come up with.
Madagascar, I think, yeah.
It's many other places, maybe the moon. Maybe Elon Musk, he has moon rockets, so maybe they're thinking of that. So we wanted to just get your reaction first and what you're hearing from people around you to these really very, I mean, we're making light of it, but these very disturbing statements and proposals from various quarters about forcibly displacing the population.
I think his words don't have any weight at all because, you know, he's been trying, even Israel has been trying under the auspices of the entire world, almost the entire world, to wipe out Gaza over the past 14 months. Nothing has paid off because the Palestinians are so much like connected with this land. They cannot really leave it. Their heart is here. The properties, everything they have, everything they own is here. So how would you really like to take them out of their hearts? That's how it is. You can take their bodies, but you cannot really take their hearts, because probably, you know, Gaza is I mean, like, people here love Gaza to the core. They really, really, really love everything about Gaza. And for them, whatever Trump says, whatever any corrupting power around the world says, they don't care at all. Okay, you want to wipe us out? Okay, do it. No worries, but we're not going to leave, because the people of Gaza are made of external stuff. The people of Gaza are so stubborn. Like, maybe Dr. Rafan has been talking about the people of Gaza many times before and how tough they are. So you cannot really beat them. You cannot really just say that you're gonna kill them, or gonna probably deceive them by some words or some sort of temptation. No, of course, no. Gaza means the world to them, and whatever you offer in exchange for that, it's not going to really drag them outside Gaza, because Gaza is their hearts. And whatever Gaza looks like at the moment, Gaza is for them the peaceful site. Gaza for them is the most beautiful site in history, and they want to rebuild it. They want to really make it more beautiful again and again and again. So they really don't care. Like you cannot really give me luxury outside Gaza, because the worst thing here is the best luxury that I can have inside Gaza. That is the connection that I'm trying to tell you about. That's the connection that people have here with Gaza, and this connection is every day being consolidated. Every single day it's being strengthened. So you are, and by those words, you're not weakening this connection or relationship or link. No, it's getting stronger. It's getting strengthened every single day. People want to rebuild. People want to go back to their homes. I've been around Gaza for probably a week. I've really gone several places. I've seen the people, some places really didn't have any differences compared with how they were before October the 7th. And this can tell you, can be a very great indicator, an obvious indicator of how much people here love life, how much they are strong together, they are united, and they will never ever give up Gaza, because Gaza is synonymous with their heart.
Well, let's look. You have been around Gaza, so let's take a look at some of the reporting you've been doing across Gaza in recent weeks, and we're going to look at some of the short video. You've actually been posting video reports at your Twitter account over the last couple of weeks, and I wish we could show them all, but we want people to know about them, so they're going to go and find them there. We're just going to show a couple of clips, and let's start with these two short clips, and then we're going to get you to talk about them, and then we'll look at some more. So this is the first one we're going to look at. You filmed in Gaza City's Al-Rimal neighborhood. Let's take a look at that.
Just total annihilation. The Holocaust of our time, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Holocaust of our time. If you can't see it, this is the Holocaust of our time. You see what Israel has done to Gaza. Every place has been targeted. Oh my God, unbelievable.
And then that's part of a longer video, but we have a second clip that we're going to show now that is from Tel El Hawa, which is also part of Gaza City. So we'll go to that in a moment.
Here are the civil defense cars and vehicles that have been also damaged by the Israeli army over the course of time. Now, the civil defense buildings in Gaza have been destroyed, deliberately destroyed, because Israel purposefully wanted to destroy all life aspects inside the territory. Now, for the civil defense, it was really important to find alternatives, because the work is very important on the ground. They retrieve bodies from under the rubble. They really help people when bombings happen, and they help the overall population with water and other needed services. So here are the civil defense cars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars. This is a part from the building that has also been hit during the genocide. Here is the building. You can probably see that. And here is the civil defense car as well. So it's just it's just incredibly devastated. People are telling me even to document what has been destroyed inside. But these cars, of course, no longer work. Look, the hole here. This hole is so big.
I mean, those are fire engines and ambulances and, paramedic vans. Tell us more about what, why you wanted to take these like walking tours of Gaza City and these neighborhoods in particular, and maybe what surprised you the most.
Well, I think because it was really hard to take the pain alone, so I just wanted to vent a bit. That's why, because when I first entered Gaza, it was totally, totally devastated. Like all the buildings are gutted, and I'm gutted at the same time. So you cannot really understand and comprehend the scale of destruction that is seen all across the strip, in every single area, particularly in the northern parts in Jabalia and Saftawi area. Those two areas are completely flattened to the ground. And when you talk about the civil defense, for example, there's nothing military here at all. But I just wanted to show the world that Israel does want only to annihilate every aspect of life and just weaken the social fabric of the Palestinian people. That's their ultimate goal and ultimate aim. And at the same time, you walk around Gaza and you have that memory and those good memories of how Gaza was before this genocide, and you feel very heartbroken. Like I remember this street, for example, in the neighborhood, it was brimming with joy. It was brimming with people's exaltation, but all of that has simply vanished. And all the students, like there were students from every single age, probably from 5 years old, from the first grade until the senior at university. And when you look at it, that there are no students, there's no traffic because it was filled with people and vehicles, and all that you can see is just piles of rubble and piles of garbage because the infrastructure has also been destroyed over the course of the past 14 months. This is truly, truly heartbreaking and insurmountable. And I just wanted to show the world like how it really feels to go around Gaza and to wander around Gaza while Gaza looks like this. Imagine if it is your neighborhood, imagine if it is your hometown, and you come back to it after a year or after 6 months and you find it like this. How would your reaction be? I mean, like I promise, like when I return to Deir al-Balah, because Deir al-Balah is not that much devastated. It has seen multiple strikes over the course of the past 15 months, but it's not. It's the least devastated city. We all know that. When you look at Deir al-Balah, there's still a glimmer of hope. But when you look at like Gaza, I don't know. You cannot really find the words to describe the carnage, the destruction, the unfathomable carnage that people are still very much trapped in that cycle of horror displacement. It's just the same scenario. People are still carrying water from very far distances. The people are still living over the rubble of their homes, and people don't know whether the unexploded ordinances are going to explode in their faces or not. This is absolutely a big trouble.
Abubaker, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's look at the next two clips because they point to some of the things you just mentioned, and then you can talk about them. So let's look at the next clip we have, which actually, I'm not sure. It's in Gaza City, I believe, but you didn't say exactly where. So let's run that now.
Yeah, let me see. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
This is Tel al-Hawa.
That's in Tel al-Hawa.
Yes, it's Tel al-Hawa.
And those are children carrying water. And that's something.
Most the two have lost their parents. The two have lost their parents. They're now responsible for the families. People should be aware.
And did you talk to those children? Do you know something about them?
I talked to them.
So where are they living? I mean, are they living in a building, in a
tent? No, either in a tent or on the wreckage of their homes. But the wreckage we're talking about is just nothing. Probably one wall standing only of the whole building, of the whole tower. There, like Tel al-Hawa is known for its towers, so it's there are many towers in Tel al-Hawa where thousands of families, hundreds of families in each tower were living before the war. Now all of those towers are flattened to the ground, so where people are going to live, there are no ways at all. So people are taking the risk to live inside completely collapsing buildings, and they don't know whether these buildings are going to fall upon their heads or not. This is extremely dangerous and hazardous and something people should be well aware of. That's why Israel is still delaying the entry of caravans and containers into the Strip. That's why people are still suffering and they don't have any life means to protect themselves from the cold, to protect themselves from any possible dangers and or harm. That is absolutely deliberate. This is the modus operandi of the Israelis. That's always been the case. And for me, when you talk about the children, for example, I met children in Al-Shujai neighborhood, not only those two children. Hear from the children of Gaza. Your heart is gonna break 1 billion times a day. Like, hear from them. One child I met, her father was killed. She only wears one piece of clothing. It's less than 10 Celsius here in Gaza. How can people cope with such an incredibly difficult situation in the face of this extreme adversity? How can people really cope with it? When you talk about children, this child, this girl, 12 years old child, I think she's the oldest for her father, who was killed by the Israeli military, is now taking shelter in a completely dank tent in Gaza over the graves. They destroyed the graves in Al-Shujai graveyard. And those graves that we are talking about, which are destroyed, most of the corpses inside them have been stolen by the Israeli military and they have been smuggled out of the territory. So when we talk about it, it's completely insane. Where are the people who have claimed that human rights are going to ensure or secure people's rights? Like, how can we honor those people who have been killed by the Israeli military? How can we honor all of those deaths if their corpses have been stolen by the Israeli army? And then look at the other children. I met a child who stayed the whole time in the north of the Strip. She's absolutely mentally ill. I talked to her, the girl, she's 12 years old, but she's not okay. She doesn't speak well. She still has a trauma to recover from. That's why when you speak to the children of Gaza, you're talking about Gaza, what 1.1 million, half of the population is children. Like, what have they got to do with this war? So they were subjected to this level of barbarity. I mean, talk about them. Talk about those children who have been deprived of their education, have been deprived of their childhood. They don't know what childhood means anymore. And then I met 3 children in Jabalia, and they're saying, like, they cannot really string 2 words, I'm sorry, from the trauma. Everything, like, what happened to you? I ask them, what happened to you? And then they say, my home destroyed, like this. And then they started crying and sobbing in pain. How can you tell these children to go? What is the way? I've been asking psychologists from around the world, how can I really, as someone from Gaza, tell these children to cope? How can I really tell them to handle the situation when they don't have a home, when they are taking a responsibility, a very huge responsibility, like trying to provide their families with water and food every single day? The free food distribution centers are still operating on the ground, and that is a huge indicator the humanitarian organizations are not honest, are not transparent in distributing aid, despite the fact that aid has been flowing in. So where are people what people are talking about? It's completely unbearable.
Let's look, Abubaker, it is just seeing the children carrying water and thinking of everything else they're coping. That was just a glimpse of what their lives are like, and what you describe as horrifying. Another aspect you mentioned we're going to see in this next clip, and then we'll get you to tell us about it.
So I think I've found a mine. Yeah, so I'm gonna walk away. I'm afraid it might explode. Oh my god, what this sound is. Yeah, there is, like, you probably can see in the background, just smoke rising from the buildings and from the rubble. People are going back to those places, the places they once owned, and they were shining in beauty, but Israel has destroyed them.
So that was, I believe you were walking towards Gaza City, and it's pretty terrifying that you saw.
Yeah.
That's the Rashid Road, and you saw that mine there. How common is that? I mean, it's terrifying to think you could have stepped on it. It could have been live and exploded. And did you walk from Deir al-Balah to Gaza City?
Yeah, I walked. I made a 16 kilometer trek. Yeah, I walked all the way, and it took me 3 hours, more than 3 hours, from Deir al-Balah to Gaza City, and I was totally exhausted after it because it's very, very tiring, and it's unbearable, to be honest, to walk on foot.
And did you stay in Gaza City?
Yeah, I stayed there 5 days.
And just, you don't have to give details, but where were you able to stay? Where did you sleep?
I slept in the wreckage of one of my friends' houses. And we were like shivering with fear every single day, every single night, because, you know, low pressure fronts have been stalking Gaza over the past few weeks.
It's so unbearably cold.
Yeah.
And I mean, seeing that, like Ali was saying earlier, there are these videos that we've seen just over the past couple of days of like torrential rain and wind, and people's tents who have gone through, 15 months, 16 months now of awful weather. It's unbearable, and all of those supplies are still just a few kilometers away on trucks.
And talk about
absolutely. But again, go ahead.
I just wanted to get you to talk a bit more about the unexploded ordnance. How you showed us that landmine, and there was a report yesterday that they said 118 people in total had been killed since the start of the ceasefire, and that included people by direct fire, by unexploded ordnance, and people who died from prior injuries. What are you hearing about the issue of unexploded ordnance, Abubaker, and how people are dealing with that?
I think you're right, because this toll includes the people who have succumbed to their injuries because of the lack of medical supplies, and it also includes the people who have been killed by those ordinances, and the others who have been killed by direct gunfire and shells by the Israeli military. Now, for that case, I spoke to the father of one of the two cases which were registered, at the Gaza Health Ministry, because I've been talking to the Gaza Health Ministry itself as well. And it was 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. He's 29 years old. And he was on the ceasefire day, when it went into effect on the morning of January 19th, he went to inspect the carnage of his home in Rafah. And once he went there, he didn't see any landmarks at all, because his home was flattened to the ground, and the rubble of his home was even bulldozed away. So he didn't see any landmarks, and he really didn't know if his home was there or not. So he went with his neighbor to their neighbor's home, and when he went there, he got in. He was inspecting also the carnage. He was checking the home of his neighbor, and then he was near one of the kitchen windows, and he just put his hand on one of these suspicious devices, and it blew up in his face. So his father, whom I was talking to yesterday, he told me, I came and I saw just half a head, and I just saw gashes in his body, many cuts, many deep cuts, and he was also the two others with him, his neighbor and the other one, his friend, were also wounded. And it was a super horrifying scene, not only because of this, because also this man, Youssef, was a father of 3 children, and his father told me one of the main obstacles that I'm still trying to iron out or to deal with is that his oldest son, who's 6 years old, keeps crying in the night asking for his father, and he couldn't say anything. What should I tell him? What should I really tell him? His father has died, and he cannot really take educating those 3 children, 6, 2.5 years old, and 1 years old. So how can he really educate these children? And those children keep suffering in pain in search for their father. So this is the tragedy that people are still thinking about. And they told me even we cannot really go back home at all.
And you,
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
I just wanted to say, and you reported on this case and this family for DropSite News.
Yeah,
We
I
can
did.
actually, I think we can put that up. I just dropped it in the chat, Tamara. And according to your reporting and the information you got from the Gaza Health Ministry, at least 2 people have been killed by unexploded ordnance.
Yeah, and there's another one today. And there's another one
Another
today.
one today, and
Oh,
about
yeah.
40 injured. So it's a pretty terrifying aspect of this. So that's Abubaker's report for DropSite News, which was published today. So congratulations on that, Abubaker. People can read more about that there. So let's talk about some more of your videos. A lot of the videos that you've posted on social media in your trek around Gaza, especially northern Gaza, show immense destruction, but you also show parts of Gaza coming back to life. And so let's take a look at these next 2 clips and get your comment on them. The first one is in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈, which is east of Gaza City. And of course, that's the neighborhood so many of us associate with your beloved teacher, our dear friend, Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈, who, as we heard from Asim and Nabil last week, was taken back and buried in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈 last week. But let's look at this first clip from 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈.
This is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 market, the place, the neighborhood after Al-Saha area. It has also been hit multiple times with the Israeli army over the course of the genocide. But again, people have reopened their markets, have reopened their shops, clothes shops, toys shops, everything. Like, life is being restored here, and everything is incredibly amazing as it was before. Like, there's nothing seem to be different between the pre-war time and the after-war or the post-war time. There's nothing different. Just people are getting back to where they were. And they have that time to relish, to rejoice at the vibrancy and the beauty of Gaza City, despite the overwhelming destruction.
And let's look.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, let's look at another clip. We'll look at them together and we'll talk about them. So the second clip, that was in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈, which is east of Gaza City. And then this one is from the Gaza City gold market.
This is the gold market in Gaza City, and just gold is being sold here. This is one of the most ancient places also in the entirety of the Gaza Strip. It has been reopened after Israel destructed this area completely, and just a few people are getting through here, get through the streets or walk on the streets to search for gold, because gold is expensive. People don't have money, they have lost their homes, they have lost their jobs. But yes, you can probably see like the gold is really, really amazing and fascinating, but there's also destruction. So this is the end of the gold market in Gaza, and in the background it's just destruction, you may see that. And this is the gold market in Gaza City.
Yeah. So
I think I'll have to start. I think I'll have to start with saying something, because people were demanding me or requesting for me to get married once I really filmed something in the gold market.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you filmed.
Everyone has big
there.
plans for you. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you filmed something there. That means that you're looking for your love, and I said no.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Keep your options open.
Yeah. Sometimes it comes without you looking, so you never know. But how typical are those types of scenes? The 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈 market looked pretty active. People are buying and selling. People's needs don't stop. the gold market there, of course, people may be selling their gold because they need money to live. But
Yeah,
as you go
that's
around
right.
Gaza, what do you see? Do you see shops open? Do you see a lot of business going on? How typical are those clips that we just saw?
Yeah, I think, like, again, it's just a clear manifestation of people's resilience, of people's love of life. Like when you see, like when you go back to an area that has been fiercely attacked over the course of the last 14 months, and you see that level of vibrancy, that level of love of life, you feel that those people really deserve to live, really deserve everything good in their lives. And those scenes are just a huge indicator, and they just tell the world that whatever you do to Gaza, people cannot really leave it at all. I remember, like, when I was going into a Zawiya market, and I found something there. Nothing at all. Like the market before and after the war is the same. There are loads of goods, there are loads of commodities, loads of spices, fruits, snacks, toys, everything, like as if the war didn't happen. Even when you see that this is happening after 14 months of horror, and people still have that smile, people are still exchanging smiles and laughs with each other, that can sum it up, that can really wrap it up. And it's just like you look at people, they're still smiling, and it has finished, we're gonna rebuild something, we're so happy, we're gonna make it more beautiful than before. And we are just indigenous to this land, we cannot really leave it. Gaza is just our heart. Gaza lives in our heart, and we live in Gaza, so that cannot be split up at all. And the scenes, not even in those places, like we are seeing this sort of rejuvenation uh, elsewhere, even in Remal neighborhood, in the University Street, elsewhere. But there is a very deliberate act of trying to erase people's love of life by blocking aid, by blocking the goods, by blocking the commodities. But I've seen at the same time, like when I saw all that destruction, I saw many gardens filled with really plants, uh, like basil, as I told you. Like I've seen many, like there are many green plants over there in many places. People have been planting their small pieces of land to make sure that they will not be devoid of, or their homes will not be devoid of vegetables and fruits. Those scenes are just like the most incredible I've ever seen when I went there, because people are still smiling and are still hoping despite all the horror that has been inflicted upon them.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
And
such a difference between, I mean, just, you know, half a mile, half a kilometer away in Tel El Hawa, where you filmed those kids, carrying water, and they've lost everything, and they can't, they're so traumatized that they can't speak. And then you see the markets full of people going about their daily lives, trying to rebuild. I mean, how is that? How does that feel, inside you? How do you hold both of those things? And I can just imagine that probably most people in Gaza are going through this, where they've survived, they want to rebuild, and there's just this individual and collective weight of trauma that will need generations to repair inside themselves. I mean, how does that? How are both of those things?
They're
How do you
put in,
hold them?
yeah. Look, the people here are really building their hopes over each other. Now, that means, like, I'm hopeful there is hope there, so we can be united together. So we're not gonna let despair or the scale of destruction, the scene of horror that we are seeing at the moment, let us because this is what people what they have been instilled into. This is what they are really desperate for. And not only this, because like I so many people, like I was talking to them. I look, it's normal. I lost my entire family, but I'm gonna build, I'm gonna marry, gonna have kids until we see free Palestine. I promise. This sort of strength is unmatched. This sort of resilience is something I've never seen before. And that's what we wanted from the very first time. That people did not let anyone make them bereft of hope at all. They stuck to it, they really clung on to it despite it was being dashed every single day by the ongoing policies by the Israelis to wipe out Gaza, to starve them, to freeze them to death, and every sort of death they have been witnessing over the course of the genocide. Again, when you look at the children, how they're playing in the streets, when you look at people how they are repainting the walls, how they are making, like they are sweeping up the streets in the most beautiful ways that you cannot really see probably in London or in Chicago, with all due respect to people who live in Chicago, of course. And when you look at that, it's absolutely amazing. You cannot really, 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 I mean, it's wonderful. It's beyond wonderful. And this, like what people, believe me, from the very first time when I talked to you, I remember at the beginning of the genocide, I told you that there are still a lot of hopeful people. There are people who have lost their entire families. There are people who have suffered unimaginable losses, but they promised to themselves, whether we are going to be killed, we're going to carry that hope with us. Whether we are not going to be killed, we're going to rebuild Gaza. And you see all the banners that are written on the streets, written on the walls, that we promised to rebuild it. And we're seeing at the moment, they promised and they are just now implementing their action on the ground. So just give Gaza the time, give them the means, and everything, I promise, everything will be like before and even more beautiful, because there are the I've seen many flowers over there. I've seen how people are smiling. I've seen how they are still going to the beach to relax, despite the scene of the beach is not like before. And this, just all of those views can give you the clue that Gaza will never be beaten. Whatever Trump says, whatever occupying power will say, to the very last child, there is hope literally soothed in their hearts. And this is something you cannot clench at all. This is what I can tell you.
Well, I mean, it's still for me, hard to think about how. I wonder how people can be so resilient. It is. I can just listen to you in awe and not try to understand it, but just listen and observe to what people are doing, because I think it's impossible for any of us who are outside that situation to really understand how people can hold these things together, the daily struggle to survive with this hope. Now, Abubaker, we have just one more video clip that I want to show, and you filmed this at the campus of Al-Azhar University in Gaza City. And this is an area where several of the major universities are clustered close together, including the Islamic University of Gaza and Al-Aqsa University. But before we show that video, I want to show a few photos of the campus area. I believe these are actually photos from IUG, the Islamic University of Gaza, which is your university. And they were shared with us by your classmate, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, who is also a very much appreciated contributor to the Electronic Intifada. So let's look at these 4 photos of the campus area. I don't know if those are Khalid's glasses there at the bottom left of the picture. And,
no, it's the library. It's the library. He used to sit there.
And what's this one?
This is the administration building where 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was spending his entire life.
And I think that was built after the 2008-2009 war, and I think I visited this building.
Oh, I think no, it's very recent, I guess, after the war of 2024. Sorry,
14.
2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
After the
sadly, I think I visited
14.
the building.
Yeah,
I visited the building that was built after 2008, and they may have destroyed it again in 2014, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Let's take a look at the next photo. And that's just a general scene of the campus. Is this an area you recognize? I love this photo because it just shows the greenery and the shade from the trees.
Yeah, and in the background is Al-Azhar University, where I
this is
and in the background, the yellow buildings are. Yeah, this is Al-Azhar University.
That's Al-Azhar University. Okay, great. And then I think we have one more, and that's just a general view.
This is the mosque. Yeah, this is the mosque inside the Islamic University, the buildings, the laboratories and of the Islamic University, and the laboratories, the building of the laboratories, the science building at Al-Azhar University. That is the view that is bringing them all.
So it's really beautiful campuses, as beautiful as any campuses I've seen anywhere in the world. And we're grateful to Khalid Al-Hissi for sharing those photos and letting us show them. And now we can show a clip, which I'm sorry to say is going to be hard to watch after seeing those beautiful photos.
As far as I remember, where dentistry students attended classes, lectures here, and also medicine students, also their lectures are held here. Look at this, all the laboratories have been hit and targeted. This is Al-Azhar University of Gaza. You can see this is one of the buildings. Utter devastation. There are no words to describe what I'm seeing. This was a yard filled with joy and happiness and vibrancy and activity by students who were always happy, attending classes, gathering to hold research or to conduct research papers, to conduct research for their studies and meet their professors. But now it's just been turned into a desert, and worse than a desert.
Yeah. So it must have, what did it feel like for you, Abubaker, to go back to your campus where you studied, where your friends were, where your hopes were, and to see this? This must have been one of the hardest things.
It really is. Like, when you look at it, it's become a desert. Even a desert is much better than that. And you see, like, many of plants that grow alone are there, and you can see just like the trees, the computers, the laptops, the everything inside the books, even the benches, the chairs, everything is destroyed. And those buildings have also been hit multiple times by the Israeli army over the course of the past 15 months. So look at them, look how it is looking, like just piles of sand, piles of rubble everywhere. And those buildings cannot really be repaired. They need to be even destroyed again. They need to be destructed and then rebuilt. So this is the level of barbarity that those universities or those educational institutions have been hit without any reason. So there is no justification of those war crimes against people. But again, I know many of those people who love, because this is the yard of the campus at this university, Al-Azhar University, and I know many of those students who were absolutely decorating those buildings in this yard were killed, and I know many of them, and like I remember very vividly many of those people who were studying dentistry, who were studying medicine as well. They were killed by Israel. Many of those students, when we talk about the death toll among students, among university students, it's over 2,000 and 3,000, I guess, students who have been killed from different universities in Gaza. And all of those universities are now a wasteland. There are wastelands, and they cannot really be used to resume education. it's very difficult to see that your university is like this. And what makes it very difficult, because when I was walking around, I was thinking about the academics who were justifying Israel's genocide. And I really remembered that Jewish Zionist university professor at Columbia University when he was justifying Israel's war crimes. So, what would his reaction be like if this were his university? What would it be like when the university professors who were justifying and giving consent for the Israelis to hit universities, what would the reaction be like? What would it be like for all those workers in the academic field would be like? It's just insane. Everywhere I went across this universe, everywhere like I went here, I was thinking about the same thing. Imagine, like, I haven't completed my education. It's been it's been almost a year and a half, and I cannot really complete my education. My colleagues have been killed. My university professors have been killed, like many of them, not all of them, but many of them. And all the lecture rooms where we hanging out, where we discussing things together, discussing the lectures, all of them have been bombed. Like, I'm asking myself all the time, like, why? But if this were an Israeli person, a student, or if this were a Ukrainian student, look how the world would react, and look how the world would erupt. What feelings you have? Sometimes, I'm sorry to say this, but sometimes when I wanted to film something, I had to turn off my heart, because the pain, I cannot really take so much pain. Like, I've really gone around so much. I've really spent kilometers and long hours walking around Gaza to film all these things. All the lovely places that I used to visit are no longer there. All the memories that I made have been buried under the rubble, and they are no longer on my mind because of what I've seen. And all of the friends, many of the friends that I used to be at with are now in graves inside the graves of Gaza, and the others have been living outside Gaza or have escaped for safety. Like when we talk about Khalid, Khalid was talking to me most of the time, like, I really hope for one day, like the ones we were spending before the war. And I said, inshallah it will happen, but look, like, our memories lost, our dreams crushed, our universities destroyed, our life paths have been smudged by the Israeli military. You think about it, like, why? Why a restaurant was hit? Why a cafe was hit? Was there anything necessary to flatten a cafe? Was anything necessary? Was there a reason to destroy or to demolish a restaurant or a university or a library or a bookshop? Even the bookshop Samir Mansour, which is I think you know it, Dr. Ali, which is the most famous bookshop in Palestine, not even in Gaza, it was also severely hit and destroyed by the Israeli occupation over the course of the genocide. And then you look at it, it was newly built, and people would loved going to it. People loved spending time there reading books and reading novels. Nothing. Israel has left nothing. Nothing has really been spared by Israeli attacks. This trauma, I think, is untreatable, and I think no one can really treat this trauma. No medications, no psychologists, and no one, because we need to build it. We don't need only to build new buildings. We need to build new memories until we really rehabilitate and recover from what we've been through.
And as you say, Abubaker, so many professors, so many students, your own friends. I know that you've lost many friends, as everyone in Gaza has, the people you had your best memories with in university. And you carry them with you, and you and Khaled and your other classmates carry them with you. And we all hope and believe that you all still have bright futures ahead of you despite this. We know what you're made of, and we know what you bring to this world. And I have a lot of belief in all of you as a generation. Some of the finest young people in the world that I've had the privilege to get to know throughout this horrific genocide, but also in the last years, the the writers we work with at the Electronic Intifada. Many of you were students of Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞, and you are just a generation of tremendous promise, even so today, and I have a lot of faith in that. We have one more photo that we're going to show you before we let you go, and Khalid said, show this photo to Abubaker and see what he says. I don't know what this photo is, but you're going to tell us.
This is Deir al-Balah, the downtown. Yeah. This is like you see, probably, 4 people in the city. That is Deir al-Balah. And right now, while I'm talking to you, you cannot find 2 people in the street. And
that
you
is
cannot
that
find 2 people.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's correct. Because Deir al-Balah is a city. Because I wrote that in the with you last October on the war anniversary, 1-year anniversary, and I said and I wrote that Deir al-Balah is a city that sleeps early and wakes up early. And by the way, I made many problems to make this interview because everyone is asleep.
It's the Midwest
So
of
yeah, you have to be
Gaza.
well aware of
People joke about the Midwest of the United
Yeah.
States. Yeah, like Chicago,
By
people
the way,
sleep
they
early
sleep- they
and
literally-
wake up early.
So we have very
because
mutual things.
because
That's really
because
good.
Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 used to say that Chicago is the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 of America. I don't know why, but that's what he said. So I'm saying that Deir al-Balah is the Midwest of Gaza.
It's beautiful.
Look, Deir al-Balah, what is Deir al-Balah known for is, first, it sleeps very early. It wakes up very early. So people normally wake up or get up like before the dawn, like 3 a.m. in the morning. And that's a time no one in the world gets up at. And they sleep very early. Like when the sunset leaves Gaza, leaves Deir al-Balah, when the sun leaves Deir al-Balah and the sunset comes, everyone gets to sleep. So it gets dark and no one can really get out. You can see probably dogs and cats outside, but you cannot see people at all. And just like this, because the vast majority of people here in Deir al-Balah are farmers and they have to go to their work very early in the morning. But what makes Deir al-Balah special is, like, if you throw a needle, you can hear its sound. This is how it is, to be honest. It's very calm, and it's like there is no like there is calm. The most probably the calmest city in the world. Believe me, that's what I love about it. And even some of the, like, when people return to the north of the Strip, some people from Gaza and elsewhere who know Deir al-Balah told me, Abubaker, I'm sure you are so happy about the return of people because you're now in Deir al-Balah, the original Deir al-Balah. And I said, no, they're welcome at any time. I mean, like, yeah, Deir al-Balah is a very beautiful city. It's known for its palm trees. It's normally taken the red color because of the palm and of the dates. And it's very calm. Like, you cannot really find people. And that was an hour before the sunset, and even an hour later, like Khalid, I remember Khalid, he was with Mahmoud al-Yazji at the same time, and they said, like, hey, well, it get very dark and we cannot really stay, no one in the streets, we had to go back to Gaza. And it was 6 p.m. and that was like very, very early, very, very early.
Like lunchtime, right?
And they were afraid. Yeah, absolutely. Like, they were very afraid. Like, yeah, we needed to go back home. It's very dark, no one in the streets. And they got back to Gaza and they stayed there probably after midnight. So that's how it is. That's why Deir al-Balah is special.
Very
incredible.
special, and it's your city, which also makes it very special. Abubaker, thank you so much for this incredible tour of Gaza and talking about so many difficult things that you have witnessed and are still experiencing, but we're so grateful for that you share them with us and you share them with the world. And we just showed a few clips of the videos that you've been posting. There are others, and of course we only showed bits of the videos, so people can find all your videos at your Twitter account or X account, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Abed W, and they should follow you
I'm
there
feeling
and
like
see.
a very great person saying this. Like I'm not a website.
Well, you
I'm
are
not a
doing
website.
fantastic
It's
reporting.
like saying you can see a wrestling match at WWE. Sorry, what did you say?
Well, it's you are doing excellent reporting, and we want to point people to where they can find excellent reporting. So we're very grateful for that. And we hope you'll come back very soon, maybe next time. One last final question from last week, since you
Go ahead.
couldn't join us. Someone had a question. What is your Premier League squad? We're not going to get an answer.
Stunned
this week either.
silence.
Yeah.
Oh no, maybe his video froze. Oh
No, I'm here.
Okay, you're back.
What was the
Okay, good.
question?
What is your Premier League squad?
What
Do you-
was
what's
what?
your-
I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
What Premier League team do you support?
Football, Premier League, Premier League.
I don't know. I think we're having difficulties. So this we are never going to
Like,
get
just
an
write
answer
it
to
down
this
in the
question.
chat. What
put
do
it
you
in-
support?
Yeah, what's your squad?
Yeah. We don't use a squad, by the way. You have to learn lots
Team.
of football terminology. We say teams and clubs. Yeah.
Okay,
we don't
club.
say-
What's your
Sorry.
Premier
Squad.
club?
Yeah, club. I think I don't have any teams. I was supporting Chelsea, but since they took sides with Israel, I know time and I
no.
hope they will lose until this day, until the club closes. But I think I love Ipswich Town for Sam Morsey, and I love Liverpool.
Excellent.
So Ipswich Town,
And Liverpool.
Sam
Also
Morsey,
great.
of course.
Yeah.
Sam Morsey, who spoke out for Gaza, and you wrote that article. You
Yeah.
interviewed him for the Electronic Intifada, and Liverpool.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Liverpool? All right. So we have our
Yeah.
answer.
By the way, Sam Morsey, the story about Sam Morsey really went to very, very important people in the sporting industry. I was told about it, and they were absolutely amazed by it. Even I saw many Instagram pages that are interested in sports that talked about it and talked about Sam's words. So it was an incredibly, incredibly important story. And I'm going to reiterate something. This is the best piece of journalism I've done during the past 15 months. So it's going to be the accolade that I'm taking anywhere. Absolutely. And it's in the best place. So I'm just reiterating something I've said. And again, like, thanks to every single one of you. I'm really thankful. Yeah, inspires
That's
me
it.
beyond belief. That's the word. Yes, an incredible man. And again, I think again, like, we're very hopeful, and we're showing that hope. Inshallah, we're going to show you from now on how Gaza is looking by our hands, by our building hands, because we're going to rebuild, we're going to do something. And by the way, we have some plants there that have grown, other than like the yellow rose, unfortunately, has not even bloomed again because it's not the time for it. But there is the Yasmin, sorry. And there is there are the other plants like 𝐓𝐡𝐞. I'm sure you know 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Probably when we meet, we'll make you something like it. And the beauty is there. Everything is there. We're going to hold on it and onto it, sorry. And yes, I think I have to leave because everyone is waiting for me to end this one. They're going to kill me. They're asleep. Bye.
Thank you, Abubaker.
Abubaker, you're the
will
best.
see you. We will see you. We'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Such a character.
And nice to be able to spend time,
Yeah.
without all the
Yes.
horror and fear of
Yeah.
the drones and the bombing in the background. So we'll to be able to spend a relaxed time. But yeah, he's doing incredible work.
He is. We're so proud. Well, let's bring Jon on. We have hey, Jon.
Hey guys, that was great.
Yeah.
That was very immersed in that. It was some good old-fashioned shoe leather journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was only a fraction of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been making these videos.
He's doing such great work.
Yeah. They're incredible. And
I knew you weren't going to get an answer to the Premier League team that he likes, because he's a journalist. He can't tell you that he's a fan of a certain team too much.
He's cautious.
He's got to be cautious.
Yeah.
You have to ask the tough questions, though.
That's right. John, you used to live in Tel El Hawa. So what was it like seeing those photos and videos of Abubaker in that neighborhood?
Yeah, it was devastating. It's basically just erased. It was the downtown heart of Gaza City, and it's just destroyed like everywhere else. And like Abubaker said, there's no military significance to those buildings down by the water that have, it's just, it's destruction for the sake of destruction, because their military got dismantled, and the only way that they believed that they could, burnish their image again, and was to commit a genocide on a level, that we've been so immersed in watching over these last 500 days. And it's just amazing to see Abubaker interacting with people. And that video you showed, Nora, in the news, like, that's Gaza. And, you hear Trump talking about whatever stupid ideas he has, and then you just see those kids sitting around the fire, and it's just, you're not going to defeat those people.
You can't defeat that.
You can't defeat that.
No.
So tough act to follow, but we have
you'll do your best.
Distance report this week as well.
Okay. Do you want to do the honors, Ali?
Take it away, John.
Thanks, Ali. All right, so we are going to be covering, well, just let me say, it's the 13th of February, day 496 since October the 7th, the 26th day of the ceasefire. And today we're going to be looking at the 5th prisoner exchange of phase 1 of the ceasefire. And this prisoner exchange took place in Deir al-Balah, where Abubaker was just talking about. And it's the 7th separate location that Qassam has done these handovers from the south in Khan Yunis to the north of the Jabalia camp on the border with Beit Lahia, which is where the third exchange was. So we're seeing this organization across Gaza, and I think that's something to note before we watch this. So there's going to be some audio here for the first few seconds of slide number 1, Tamara. So I just wanted to give you a little clip of the soundtrack of this video. Again, high production value, significant, a lot of significant details in this video. And you can see this is the shadow unit getting their directive. And like Tarek Azoum from Al Jazeera said while reporting this on Saturday morning, the car emerges out of nowhere. These are not long convoys of cars. Again, I've removed the prisoners from here following the Third Geneva Convention. I don't think that we should be showing them on either side. So we're going to continue to not do that. But you can see this is in Deir al-Balah. You can see the commander talking, and he says directly, he addresses Israel directly. He says, "Please, I address you. Continue implementing the second phase of the deal and try to get everyone out. There are a lot of prisoners with the Al-Qassam brigades, and I want all the prisoners to return home. Continue implementing the second and third phases." So that's what the commander's saying there. And you can see him, he's standing in front of martyr posters of the commanders from the Central Division, Central Brigade of the Qassam brigades. And that's Ayman Nofel in particular. He was killed early in the war. And Marwan Issa, who was the deputy to Mohammed al-Daif and really the operations chief. And he's from Al-Barej, which is in the middle camps as well. So you're seeing the handover again, hundreds, if not thousands of fighters on the ground in a completely separate location. And we've been pointing this out all throughout the war. that the fighters operate in territorial units. They're not running around Gaza. And now we're seeing that being the case here again, the demonstration that these prisoners are being held in different places throughout Gaza. They're being held by the shadow units. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 making a statement in these videos. Israel is watching these videos in detail. And you can see that the camera's not focusing in on things for very long. I did notice I skipped the map tomorrow. Maybe we could throw the map up now just to give people a sense. I was going to lead with this map, but you can see Deir al-Balah in the central area there, and the key landmarks. That's the Netzarim corridor that divides the north from the south. Gaza City, Zaytun is Gaza City, just to the north there. And you can see the main camps. Nusrat camp, which is where the raid was to the massacre to rescue those 3 captives, was the only rescue of captives throughout the entire war. You can see the Barej refugee camp, Al-Maghazi refugee camp, and Deir al-Balah, which predates, is not a camp, has camps in it, but it is not. It is itself part of historic Gaza, as Abubaker was talking about. So just to give you a sense, and south of Khan Yunis is Rafah. So we normally focus in on, and the main reason was something that Abubaker pointed out, was that Deir al-Balah did not experience the total destruction invasion that was that defined the other places in Gaza. And so we haven't focused that much on the middle camps, but we will today, because there's a couple interesting details in this that I want to point out to everybody. So let's look at number 2. Because this is the thing. So the shadow unit, I gave a breakdown last show on the shadow unit. This is 𝐓𝐡𝐞's unit in charge of the prisoners. It was set up in 2006 after the capture of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 under the command of Mohammed Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar's brother, who was a commander in Khan Yunis and is now one of the top commanders, if potentially the top commander of 𝐓𝐡𝐞. We'll see how this all unfolds in the months ahead. But the shadow unit reported directly to Mohammed al-Deif, who 𝐓𝐡𝐞 acknowledged was killed earlier in the war, believed to have been killed in July, last summer in the war. But so we're seeing the shadow unit also the same way as the territorial units, because now we're seeing shadow unit in Deir al-Balah. So that's an interesting detail to note. This exchange of prisoners was 3 captives, Israeli captives, for 183 Palestinians. 73 of them had life or long sentences, and 111 of them were people captured in Gaza. No charges against them, not even a pretense of there being charges against them, captured as bargaining chips and sent to torture camps in southern Israel, like Sidi Taman, which will be, I'm sure there'll be books and reports written for decades on the torture that went on in those camps. And so it's just brutal. And people in Gaza celebrated so much for the 111 people that were returned to Gaza. The celebrations with fireworks and gunfire actually set off Israel's Iron Dome. So the Iron Dome fired missile interceptors into the air because the celebration in Gaza was so significant for the prisoners. So just a couple notes on the shadow unit. So this in the first phase of this exchange, this is exchange 5 of, there will be 8 ultimately, if all goes according to plan, and 290 prisoners that are serving life sentences will be released in this first phase. And that's half of the Palestinian prison population that has life sentences, and the Palestinians are attempting to get the other half out in the next stage. So that's when stage 2 negotiations phase 2 negotiations were supposed to start early last week, and they did not. They are beginning to start, although they're both separate right now. There's talks in Egypt and talks in Doha that are happening. So we'll have to follow that story. But if we look at number 3, This was an interesting shot of the tunnels. These three prisoners that were released, they spoke about being in the tunnels the whole time after the raid in Nusrat. And the raid in Nusrat was the massacre of 275 Palestinians. More than 700 were wounded. Take on an Israeli raid into an apartment where Israelis were living above ground with a family. So after those raids, which was predicted, the prisoners were taken underground and spent the rest of their time underground. But I pulled this from the video because it's a really interesting shot of the tunnel network, and you can see the way that it's built. You can see the size of it, and it's just a good indication of it. That arch system is the trick to the engineering of the tunnel systems, and that's where it gets its durability from, its resilience from. It's able to move a little bit to so that it doesn't buckle under the pressure of sand or airstrikes or flooding. So it's an interesting shot. And if we look at this next slide, you can see the blast door. And so for the Israeli military, they weren't really ever fighting in these tunnels, because you can see just by this single picture from this one video from the prisoner exchange, that blast door is very difficult to get into. It's sealed, and the tunnel can't be flooded. The tunnel can't be raided. That has to be blown up by the Israelis to get to the other side of the door. And if you look above the door, you can see that was the area I showed a few times over the course of the war, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 booby trapping these tunnels. And that's when they would put radia and television IEDs built by 𝐓𝐡𝐞. They would build them into the walls all around there. And so when you see pictures like this, you just really see the fact that Israel was not down in these tunnels fighting. We would have seen the footage. We just saw the footage from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 showing the prisoners leaving the tunnel. There's no reason why they wouldn't have footage of the fighting in the tunnel. But I think we'll find in the coming years that Israel also lied about the extent to which they fought in the tunnels. And I just wanted to bring you those couple shots from there that I think are super interesting about the engineering of the tunnels. If we look at number 5, you got the stage again. We have a completely different stage in Deir al-Balah than we had in the previous ones, but this one is just as potent. It says, "We are the flood." A reference to the Al-Aqsa flood operation. And it says, "We are the day after," in reference to the day after plan of the Biden administration, of the Israelis, of everybody talking about the day after for Gaza and not talking about Gazans. And this is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 saying that we are the day after, and they survived the war underneath. They survived the war intact and achieved all of their goals of the war so far, and Israel has not, which is something that Giora Eiland, who is the author of the General's Plan, admitted just the other day that that Israel's only achieved a quarter of one of their 4 goals, and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 reached all 4 of them. We can maybe discuss that in the discussion after, but underneath the stage it says absolute victory in Hebrew, and it's got the red triangle on it with Sad Netanyahu being defeated of his absolute victory with the red triangle. And you can see the destroyed Merkava tank there. That was in Jabalia. That wasn't the one that I showed a couple weeks ago from Beit Hanun. So they have multiple photos of tanks with their barrels blown off, the turret toss that I described. So another solid stage, solid messaging. And then number 6, in the crowd, this was just a subtle thing. But again, the Israelis noticed it right away, because there's messaging to both. There's messaging to the Israelis, and we'll see coming up, there's messaging to Palestinians as well. So they noticed that this rifle, which is an Israel Weapons Industries Negev Special Forces light machine gun, or a squad automatic weapon, as the Americans would call it, fires 800 rounds a minute. And on the ammunition drum underneath his index finger there, that's the ammunition drum, and it's got markings on it of the Israeli soldier who was killed in the raid on the Kisifim IDF base on October 7th, raided by Nukba forces and took over that base. And they captured his light machine gun and brought it home. And before we saw this, we had never seen this footage before. And there's in Israel, the soldier whose name is on that rifle. He's one of the hero stories of October 7th. They framed it as a hero story. That he, when everybody else ran and hid in the Israeli soldiers all ran and hid in their bomb shelters, this one soldier stayed out and fired 675 rounds before he was overtaken by Nukba forces in 𝐓𝐿𝐴 base. And so they had hyped him up to be this big hero. So when Qassam released or showed this photo, this was just a quick, like 1 second in that video. You probably didn't even notice it, but the Israelis noticed it, and they noticed that that was his gun. The military censor went right to work to say that was just his ammunition drum. They didn't have his rifle as well, but we know that's not the case. Although we do know that Qassam has gotten that particular type of Negev light machine gun in a number of situations. We saw one in Beit Hanun. We even saw the Mujahideen brigades capture one of them, and that's not that surprising. Each squad has 2 of these light machine guns in it, so it comprises 20% of an Israeli squad's weapons. So it makes sense that these weapons were captured. And so interesting point that the Israelis definitely noticed right away and pointed out that that was his rifle. So, and then if we look at number 7, we have, this is communicating with Gazans on this Yassin warhead. It's also a good shot of a Yassin warhead. We often see them as they're being deployed, but there it is just sitting there, and it says Dawar al-Halak, which essentially means watch yourself. And it's an allusion to an operation. And if we show that operation next here, number 8, this was by the Barej Battalion. Number 8, video 8, is it up? So the Barej Battalion is one of 4 in the Central Brigade, Maghazi Battalion, Nusrat Battalion, Dar al-Bala Battalion, and the Barej Battalion. Yeah, I do want to play it. Let's play number 8. So this is an operation that I showed you this back in November. These fighters are digging out a tactical tunnel. In Barej in November, the Israelis invaded Barej on the outskirts of the central camps, and they were met by this tunnel operation. That was a pretty epic series of those guys tunneled out and then hit these 3 vehicles in a row. They hit 2 D9 bulldozers, one with a Yassin 105. This is with an RPG-7 that he gets him right in the back. With an RPG-7, which is a devastating weapon. And then we're going to see our 3rd fighter here emerge from the tunnel. So he says, Dawar al-Halak, like watch yourself, and that was a sort of a one of those verses that we heard, analyze this was one of those, analyze this Duwari, call the tow truck was famous too from people. And that was, it's a saying that's essentially says, watch yourself, watch out for yourself, keep your head up. And they hit them. And then that fighter in the previous still is holding his weapon with a sticker on it that says the same thing. So these subtle things, they're communicating with the Israelis, but they're also communicating with their local audience and with people in Gaza. So that was just one little note from the Barej Battalion that was at the Central Brigade prisoner exchange number 5. So number 6 is due to happen on Saturday morning, local time in Gaza. We'll talk more about it in the discussion because there's still some questions about whether it's going to happen because Israel is not fulfilling its obligations, and 𝐓𝐿TSAM has noted that. And Trump has said a bunch of things about how Trump and Netanyahu both have said a bunch of things about how all the captives have to be handed over on Saturday, and just really muddying the waters of what is a well organized and detailed agreement that both sides agreed to and were guaranteed by the U.S. as well. So we'll talk about that soon. But also this week, after the exchange, prisoner exchange number 5, the Netzarim corridor was fully evacuated. If we look at the map here, it's map B. We've been showing this map. This was the widest the Netzarim corridor got. You can see it's pressing right down onto Nusrat camp and Tel El Hawa. It's in the second Intifada when Netzarim was a settlement. It was not abutting Tel El Hawa. So the fact that they expanded the corridor this wide during this war was something that was they saw as a huge strategic gain, although militarily it's not, because it's a wide open piece of land, as you'll see coming up. But on the date of evacuation was overnight, February 8th, and by 8 a.m. Sunday morning, the 9th, the IDF had evacuated, and IDF Army radio had said the IDF completely withdrew from the Netzarim corridor tonight, and that was 8:28 a.m. on 9 February 2025. So the Netzarim corridor was fully defeated, and you can see in this next map, this is the Israeli admitting that the Netzarim corridor was defeated, because we had reported previously that the western edge had been opened up, and that's what created the Great Return. More than 500,000 Palestinians returned in the first 36 hours that was open along the coastal road. But Salahuddin Street is more the highway, and they had a checkpoint temporarily on that for a couple of weeks. That has been removed, according to the IDF, through Army radio again. As part of the implementation of the agreement, the IDF withdrew completely from the Netzarim corridor tonight, the 22nd day of the agreement. Tonight, in accordance with the agreement, the IDF withdrew in full, positioned itself on the buffer zone, and Gazans are documenting the area this morning, which was completely flattened by military forces over the past year. This is Army radio report. When the IDF established the entire territory of Netzarim with new outposts, infrastructure, and roads. Everything has been destroyed, said Army radio on Sunday morning. And we can see that in number 11 here with an aerial shot, with literally just flattened everything. And of course, as has been the case everywhere when people return to horrors along the Netzarim corridor, where there was shoot to kill zones that we reported on previously. And so, of course, they found bodies all throughout there. The Israelis burned the houses that were partially standing before they left. They burned all their materials, something they did in 2005 as well. And if you look at slide number 12, this is Netanyahu's channel 14, Hillel Rosen. And he pointed out last week that the soldiers left Netzarim today in tears. They feel that everything they did for more than a year in the Gaza Strip was in vain, which is what the next slide says. This was from Al Jazeera. Listening Post did a segment on it of the Israelis crying about leaving the Netzarim corridor, believing that everything that they had done in Gaza was for nothing. So that is the sentiment within Netanyahu's television channel, Channel 14. And that is the reporting on the Netzarim corridor. So the Netzarim corridor has been defeated. Israel has withdrawn from the corridor. They are now exclusively in the buffer zone, where they will remain into the second phase of the deal. In the second phase of the deal, when the soldiers are the captured soldiers are traded, are exchanged for Palestinians, the Israelis will move out of the buffer zone in phase 2 in preparation for phase 3, which is reconstruction. And that is what has been cast in doubt by off-the-cuff statements by Netanyahu and Trump this week. So I'm going to take a look at the West Bank now. Let's look at the West Bank full map. this is again a map from Maxwell. It's gives you an idea of where we're talking about, but we're going to really focus in on the north of the West Bank. In the next map, you can see the real area of the Israeli attacks are in the triangle, what the British used to call the Triangle of Terror: Jenin, Tulkarm, Nablus, Tubas. Even Qalqilia has had mechanized invasions, and those they're not limited to the north, but they're focused on the north. Nora covered some of this through Tamar's reporting, her excellent story yesterday that people should check out. But we're 3 weeks into Operation Iron Wall, which is an interesting name to choose because that goes back to the roots of Zionism and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, that the only way the Israelis can exist, that Zionism can exist in the land that is overwhelmingly not Jewish, is to set up an iron wall. And that is, in many cases, it's literal. It's in the beginning, it was called the Tower and Stockade. So it was a base, a wall, and a watchtower. And that is going to be the focus of this operation that I'm going to get into today. But to just reiterate some of the things that were said earlier, UNRWA said that 40,000 Palestinian refugees have been forcibly displaced from the northern West Bank, 20,000 from Jenin camp, 10,500 from Tulkarm camp, 4,000 from Tamun town, which is just south of Tubas there. And 400 displaced from Far al-Farah camp, which is just south west of Tubas there. And this is the second major operation. It's difficult to even demark these operations because Israel launched Operation Summer Camps, that they called them. The resistance called it the horror of the camps. And that battle took place from August into October. And then this Iron Wall operation began right after the ceasefire in Gaza was marked. And since then, there's been more than 77 Palestinians killed since January 1st. The Israeli military says that it's killed 50 fighters in 2 weeks, 35 gunmen, and 15 in drone strikes. So they're already admitting that that their combatant deaths are less than half of what they have killed. And Tamara reports on some of those civilians in her article. But the Iron Wall, again, to go back to that, the stockade and tower is what is going to be the focus of this next operation. I'll just set it up. This is a gunfight between a lone Palestinian fighter who raided an Israeli military position and single-handedly took down 10 of 11 Israeli soldiers. So this was in Tassir checkpoint, which was just northeast of Tubas, up in the Jordan Valley there. So let's take a look at slide number 14. It has audio. So that's the Iron Wall. The Iron Wall is that pillbox tower, the tower and stockade. The stockade is the bunker, is the barracks that the soldiers stay in. And so this Palestinian fighter, Mohammed Daragma, he is the brother of an Islamic Jihad commander from the Tubas battalion who was killed a year ago. He carried out this operation, a pretty remarkable operation, to target the tower itself where the soldiers are. And it's very symbolic of the Zionism's way of gaining a foothold in Palestine was through these tower and stockades. And that's what is being hit in this operation. We can look at the next one. You can see the top of the pillbox being hit by fire, but the soldier actually, the Palestinian fighter actually made it to the base of the pillbox. Number 15 shows that. You can see the gunfire hitting the top of it. And so this squad, Israeli squad that is guarding this tower is 11 fighters. And the Palestinian fighter who attacked them, there's 8 wounded and 2 killed. So he got 10 out of the 11 fighting 1 on 11. And it's let me just read to you here from the Army radio. This is the IDF's version of the operation, which is all we have because Mohammed Dergma was killed. So a few minutes after 6 a.m., 2 soldiers leave the pillbox for the nearby checkpoint as part of the dawn alert. The Palestinian ambushed them both at the entrance of the outpost wearing a tactical vest and an M16 rifle with 2 magazines. So he took down the squad with 2 magazines. The IDF estimates that the Palestinians sneaked into the outpost on foot during the night and ambushed the soldiers at first light. The Palestinian charged the 2 Israeli soldiers from very short range, just a few meters, and hit them very hard. At this point, an exchange of fire begins, which lasts many minutes between the Palestinian who is at the entrance of the outpost and the forces inside the outpost, consisting of a squad of 11 soldiers. During the exchange of fire, the Palestinian both entered the outpost and the pillbox, but the IDF emphasizes he did not go up to the top of the pillbox. So it sounds like he was on his way up to the top of the pillbox, if not up to the top of the pillbox, because otherwise, not sure why the Israelis would say, we emphasize that he did not make it up to the top of the pillbox. In any case, he made it back down out of the pillbox and was killed by a backup force that had just arrived. It sounds by this report from the Israelis that he was seconds away from getting away free from this pretty remarkable operation, 11 against 1, and he takes them down. And he is part of this operation was part of a number of operations that have taken place during this Iron Wall operation. 6 Israeli soldiers have been killed and 36 have been wounded in 522 qualitative and popular resistance operations in the West Bank in January 2025 alone. And they work out over this Iron Wall invasion to be 25 a day of operations, more than half of them armed clashes. So we're seeing the resistance in the West Bank meeting this challenge despite the being pushed out of their villages. Pushed out of their villages of Tamun and the refugee camps of Jenin, Al-Fara, and Nur Shams and Tulkarm. If we look at number 18, we're seeing a really interesting thing that's matching the Gaza. Oh, that's the one more of the tower. You can see the tower got hit hard on that raid. And this is just very symbolic for people who aren't familiar with this. These towers, these pillbox towers are all over. These Israeli towers are all over Palestine. They're how they keep guard. They're the watchtowers that are built into the separation wall, the apartheid wall that runs around Palestinian communities. They're all these outposts, these pillbox towers are at regular intervals all the way through the wall, and that's where they stick their gun out and snipe kids walking to school, or just generally wreak havoc as an occupying force from those towers. So they're symbolic historically, and they're symbolic today because they're built right into the wall. But this is what's been happening, and the fighters in Tulkarm here want to show us that they have set up a joint operations room that the Qassam Brigade, Saraya al-Quds Islamic Jihad, and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, Youth of Revenge and Liberation is what they're calling the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade faction in there. And they're saying our coordination is sacred, our sacred coordination. And that is an allusion, using the same words, to Mahmoud Abbas, the PA head, who in 2014, in the lead up to the 2014 war, said that security coordination with Israel is sacred and will continue whether we agree with the policy or not. And people at that time, in the lead up to the 2014 war, were calling for and have been calling for since the Second Intifada, for the ending of this security coordination where the Palestinian Authority is a collaborator regime that acts on behalf of the Israelis. And Abbas's saying that security coordination was sacred was something that stuck in the craw for quite a long time. And you can see the fighters here playing on that our sacred coordination is a joint operations room. So they're setting up joint operations rooms in the same way that Gaza has done that. And this is happening here in the 𝐓𝐿 camp. And just to give you a sense of what the communiques coming out of 𝐓𝐿 sound like, this is Al-Quds Brigade's 𝐓𝐿 battalion the other day. Our fighters in the 𝐓𝐿 camp unit, alongside comrades in the resistance factions, successfully ambushed a 20-soldier infantry force at precisely 4 p.m. today. The enemy was attempting to advance and showcase its presence in 𝐓𝐿 camp when they were caught in a tight ambush. Our fighters unleashed heavy direct gunfire, achieving confirmed hits. We affirm that the resistance is alive and that our people's will shall never surrender to the dictates of the enemy and its agents, an allusion to the PA. From beneath the ruins of our camps and through the alleys that offer the enemy nothing but death and the might of our heroes, we shall continue to rise. The fighters in the 𝐓𝐿 camp, enduring over 15 days of Nazi-like assault, stand firm and reaffirm that the resistance will prevail and that our banner shall never fall. And then this is in Jenin. They released the same type of message in Jenin, that there is a joint operations room that's coordinated with Qassam, Saraya al-Quds, and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, with a Quranic verse that says, our soldiers will be the victorious ones. And this is happening in Jenin as well. And Jenin has been ongoing attack on Jenin since summer camp started. It really never ended in Jenin. Before this Iron Wall operation, we'll remember that the PA, the Palestinian Authority security forces, had a 48-day siege on the Jenin brigades. That they were the Palestinian Authority were part of the first 10,000 to be driven out of the camp, were driven out by the PA, not by Israel. And then now in the preceding weeks of this Iron Wall operation, they're operating together side by side, the PA and the Israelis. Previously, the PA would leave and the Israelis would come in. In Jenin right now, they're operating side by side, and Israel is saying that they intend to stay in Jenin. We'll see how that goes. Abu Ubaidah, when he last spoke, he spoke to note the ceasefire on the 19th of January. He said, we appreciate and salute the heroes of the West Bank for their stance of honor and dignity. A special greeting to Jenin, the sister of Gaza, in courage and defiance. So links between the West Bank and Gaza always in the messaging from both sides. And we're continuing to see that in the northern West Bank. So that is the resistance report for this week. We started in Deir al-Balah, we went to Netzarim, and this is the north of the West Bank.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jon. And yeah, it's so important to look at what is happening in the West Bank. Through the last 15, 16 months, of course, it's been obscured because of the genocide and Holocaust in Gaza. But, and this is something that Tamara points out in her report that we published yesterday. The Israeli public, Israeli lawmakers are now trying to go full force in the West Bank, trying to prep it for full annexation. And the settler movement is, it's not like they were never emboldened, but they are even more, like the emboldening has been amplified, especially over the last few months. It's just, once again, it's going under the noses of the corporate media, of course. So thanks for
massive land grabs in the West Bank. There are attacks on the refugee camps, but in the rural areas of the West Bank, there's massive land grabs that haven't been seen since the Second Intifada. So
It's just unbelievable. I mean, the fact that 40,000 people have been displaced from areas in the north, and what UNRWA said, which is what you pointed out, is that it's these kinds of attacks we haven't seen the acceleration
unprecedented. To
since
drive
20
drive
years.
people out of the camp is a new phenomena. That is a Gaza phenomena being brought to the West Bank. So,
And where are people going? I mean, 40,000 people, that's not a trickle. That's a flood of people being driven out of their homes in Jenin and 𝐄𝐿 and Tubas. And
yeah, I mean, it's taken a couple months to do it, and some people are still staying. There's still stories of, people holding down the street as the last family on the street. They move with their families. They stay with friends that are just down the hills further, because you're not traveling all over the West Bank either. You're basically trapped in the north. So they're moving to the nearby villages. But this is unprecedented, and people are moving in part because they've seen this horrific genocide, and they've seen this army committing this, and they think they're going to do it to them. And so the fact that Israel's impunity with the U.S. and with the international community has put people in the West Bank in a position that they haven't been in.
Top Israeli lawmakers, members of Knesset, have said we're going to do to the West Bank what we just did in Gaza. Like, they're openly admitting it and threatening.
Well, what they're doing is definitely on a scale we haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
And those ministers are expressing their desires. And the question is, what's going to stop them?
Right.
The U.S., whether Biden or Trump, was never going to stop them. This has been going on. The West Bank has been facing almost unprecedented levels of violence for the past 16 months. It's just been overshadowed by Gaza.
Yeah.
And the Biden administration didn't do anything. The EU didn't do anything. So what it boils down to, a question many people will ask, and I suppose we'll be watching closely, is will the resistance be able to continue to meet this level of aggression by Israel? And I guess that a lot of people will see that as the last line of defense.
We'll keep following it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Asa, you had a story this week that we wanted to focus on for a few minutes. So why don't you tell us about some interesting revelations and admissions by top Israeli government officials and international war crimes fugitive 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿.
That's right, Nora. Well, last week there was the highest level public Israeli admission about the Hannibal Directive so far, and it was aired on Israeli television, so we can watch that clip right now. Oh, we're having some problem. Okay, here we go.
חוצות את הגדר עם חטופים ישראלים, גם לשאול מה עובר לך בראש, וגם נוהל חניבל זה משהו שאתם חושבים עליו באותו רגע?
נוהל חניבל, רק נגיד, הנוהל שאומר לירות על מנת להרוג כאשר יש רכב עם חטוף ישראלי.
אני רוצה שתבינו שהיכולת של שר ביטחון לתת הוראות אופרטיביות בלוח זמנים שהכל קורה היא דבר מאוד מוגבל.
ניתנה הוראה לנוהל חניבל?
אני חושב שבאופן טקטי במקומות שונים ניתנה, במקומות אחרים לא ניתנה, וזו בעיה.
Thank you. So what was said there, I can read out the short set. What was said there in Hebrew for our listeners, what we saw was 𝐄𝐥𝐞 𝐄𝐿, who was the former defense minister of Israel, and that clip was from a longer 50-minute interview with him, and it aired on February the 6th on Israel's Channel 12, and I wrote this short report about it. Gallant, of course, was Israel's defense minister on October the 7th, 2003, however, he was fired in November last year after falling out with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, what was said there for listeners was, first of all, the journalist says, when you see the convoys crossing the border with Israeli hostages, what crosses your mind? Is the Hannibal Directive something you are thinking about at that moment? And then the second journalist chimes in, just to explain, the Hannibal Directive says to shoot to kill when there is a vehicle containing an Israeli hostage. And Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister, says, I want you to understand that the ability of the defense minister to give timely operative instructions when everything is happening is very limited. And then the second journalist, whose name is Amit Sagal, chimes in, was the order given for the Hannibal Directive? And Yoav Gallant replies, I think that tactically in various places it was given and in other places it was not given, and that is a problem. So, as you heard, that was it's a really striking admission there. It was that the Hannibal Directive was used, and that it was used, in his words, quote, tactically and in various places. So for any new EI viewers who may not have been following this story with us since October 2023, the Israeli journalist explained what the Hannibal Directive is quite succinctly. Quote, the Hannibal Directive says to shoot to kill when there is a vehicle containing an Israeli hostage, end of quote. So the Hannibal Directive is an Israeli military doctrine which was first established in secret by Israeli generals in 1986. And they were determined to stop Israeli soldiers being captured alive by Lebanese and Palestinian resistance fighters. The capture of Israeli prisoners of war like this has in the past successfully led to prisoner exchanges. And as we've seen illustrated over the past several weeks, these exchanges have led to the successful liberation of hundreds of Palestinians from Israeli jails. The Hannibal Directive effectively says that it's better for these captive Israeli soldiers to be killed by Israel than to be kept alive and in Palestinian hands. And to understand more about the history of the Hannibal Directive, you should read a feature that's on screen here that I wrote about it last year, titled Israel's National Murder-Suicide Pact. So the Hannibal Directive was in some ways nothing new on October the 7th, 2003, but what really was new was how it was extended from Israeli soldiers to Israeli civilians and the sheer scale that it was used on. By now, multiple eyewitness statements and several senior Israeli military sources have confirmed that the Hannibal Directive was used indiscriminately all over the so-called Gaza envelope region on that day. The key eyewitnesses have included Yasmin Porat, a former Israeli captive who narrowly survived a deliberately calculated Israeli tank shelling of the building where a group of Hamas fighters were holed up with 11 other Israeli captives in kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. The dead included the 12-year-old Israeli twins Yanai and Liel Hatzroni, the girl you can see on the screen here, whose image was later used in official Israeli propaganda, falsely alleging she had been burned to death by Hamas. But in fact, by now we can pretty definitively say she was burned to death by Israeli tank shelling, a Hannibal strike by an Israeli tank fired on the orders of this man, Brigadier General Barak Hiram, who since then has actually been promoted to the head of the Gaza division. The Gallant interview with Channel 12 last week was significant, this new interview. It was the first time that a contemporary Israeli minister has publicly confirmed the use of the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. So, as you heard in the clip, continuing his sentence where he confirmed that Hannibal had been used tactically in some places, Gallant even clarified that in other places it was not given, and that is a problem. It's unclear from this statement what exactly he considered there to be the problem. Was he actually saying that it was a problem that Hannibal wasn't applied everywhere, that they didn't kill enough of them? It's a little unclear. It's true that if every single Israeli captured by Palestinians near Gaza had been killed in a Hannibal attack, Hamas would have had no Israeli captives to negotiate with, and there might still have been no ceasefire now. But the Channel 12 journalist didn't press him on this point. And I checked with David Sheen, the journalist who's also one of our Hebrew translators who translated this video for us, and he clarified that immediately after this clip that we just showed, they changed the subject, they moved right on to a different topic. So, if the clip seems like it ends a little abruptly, that's how it is in the original. Ali, you've also let's bring the others on now. Ali, you've followed this story very closely, and you've done a lot of the reporting on it, often with David Sheen. What did you make of 𝐶𝐿𝐼𝐻's admission in this interview?
I was stunned that he would say it so openly. I mean, the thing is that watching that interview, they don't treat it as this great revelation. They treat it as a given. And that's very telling to me, that it's sort of taken for granted that the Hannibal Directive is used, and that this still hasn't penetrated at all the mainstream Western media, who still talk about that Hamas killed 1,200 people on October 7th, which is very clearly not the case. And the reporting that you've done, Asa, and we've done over the past 16 months shows that we don't have the exact number, but Israel almost certainly killed hundreds of people on October 7th, hundreds of its own people on October 7th. And they're still blocking any sort of independent in Israeli terms, commission of inquiry that might reveal what happened. I did notice a turn of phrase in the New York Times. I highlighted that on Twitter a couple of days ago, where there was a subtle change of phraseology where they said that, I think it was, Hamas led an attack on October 7th, which ended with 1,200 people dead. And I thought that was interesting, because they didn't say, I don't know if that was just an accident but nothing is in the New York Times. Those were very carefully chosen words that suggest a recognition now, an undeniable recognition that Israel killed many of its own people. And there's Yoav Gallant saying it. And another thing I'll say about this, I think when we had Ilan Pape on last time, we were talking about how Israelis seem to think Hebrew is a secret language, and that they can talk amongst themselves in Hebrew and the rest of the world won't hear it. And I also think there was a bit of that here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, the New York, I don't think the New York Times or any kind of mainstream corporate media outlet has even reported on the Yoav Gallant admission, or has done any sort of, in-depth investigation still, 16 months later into October. And, how about the burned cars, the hundreds and hundreds of burned cars that could not have been burned,
that they buried,
destroyed, that they buried in under the ground. I mean, completely destroying the crime scene. I mean, just astonishing still,
And they demolished Kibbutz Be'eri, of course.
Yes.
They demolished, have they demolished all of it? Or just, do you know, Ellie? Or just the...
I think there was there was still one person living there or something.
They did I know they demolished a lot of it.
Oh, okay.
I know they demolished Pesci Cohen's house, which is where that massacre took place.
Right.
Which Yasmin Porat survived, and Hadas Dagan. And luckily they lived to tell the tale, because otherwise the official, another story that David Sheen and I did, the official Israeli army inquiry into what happened at Kibbutz Be'eri was a complete whitewash. And if there had not been these survivors, they would have gotten away with it. they would have gotten away with the lies the army told to cover up the fact that Barak Hiram ordered the shelling of a house full of Israeli civilians.
Right. And there's been a development, the Hind Rajab Foundation, whose director we had on a few weeks ago, they have filed lawsuits against one
Yehuda
of
Vach. They filed
an
ICC complaint against Yehuda Vach, who is the brother of Golan Vach,
right,
who was the inventor of the burned babies lie.
That's right.
And both of these characters, their brothers, who are both military officers, were responsible for a lot of the atrocities in Gaza. I don't want to get ahead of myself because we have some new investigative reporting coming out on that soon. But the significance of what Yoav Gallant said, and I'm really grateful to Asa for reporting it in English, is it really puts all this beyond any doubt. It puts it beyond any doubt. And if we were able to bring this much into the light, again, of course, we're using almost entirely Israeli sources. All this is coming from Israeli army officers, from the Israeli media, from Israeli eyewitnesses, from Israeli survivors, and we're bringing it out from the Hebrew media and putting it together. And if we can do that as little old Electronic Intifada, the New York Times could do it, the Washington Post could do it, the BBC could do it, but that is not their job. Their job is to do propaganda for genocide, and that's it. That's the importance of highlighting these statements.
The Al Jazeera documentary from October 7th that was released on What is Hidden is Greater had two testimonies from fighters, from a commander talking about his whole unit watching the raid on Kfar Aza from the bushes around it, and I think from Be'eri as well. So that was the first time that we had heard from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 directly talking about witnessing that, and they were definitely the witnesses. So there's definitely more to hear from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 about that angle of it as well.
Yeah. Well, hopefully in due time we'll get those testimonies.
I think if it ever comes out in the mainstream media, they'll do the usual sort of trick where they'll sort of pretend that they knew about it all along.
Right, of course.
And we published on it adequately. You know, we gave it adequate attention by putting it, you know, in the 20th paragraph at the end of another article. You know, the New York Times has mentioned the Hannibal Directive in passing in a few places here and there, but they haven't given it anywhere near the kind of reporting that it deserves.
Right.
One factor that I think is important here, and the reason why, to the extent this has come out, it's come out from Israel, for example, with Kibbutz Be'eri, is because people want to know what happened to their loved ones. They want the truth. And they go and look at things, or they look at where their loved one died, and they say, this doesn't add up. We want to know what happened. And a lot of the family members of those who were killed by General Barak Hiram, the Israelis who were killed by General Barak Hiram at Kibbutz Be'eri, were the ones pushing for the truth to come out. And they're not doing it for political reasons. They're not doing it because they want to support the Palestinians or Hamas, or they agree with me or you. They want to know what happened to their loved ones. And I think that is going to be a force that is going to bring a lot of the truth out.
We will see. Thank you so much, Asa and Ali and John. Ali, you wanted to also talk a little bit about the ceasefire crisis, and there's been a lot of speculation or unconfirmed information, very unclear what has happened in the last 24 hours. As both John and I mentioned, Abu Ubaidah said right after the Netzarim corridor was finally evacuated by the Israeli occupation forces. Abu Abeda, the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades, said Israel has not made good on its obligations under the ceasefire terms. Hamas listed hundreds of violations of the ceasefire. And they said, the next prisoner swap will be postponed indefinitely until Israel agrees to the terms that it had already agreed to. And now in the last 24 hours, it looks like Israel may have been feeling some sort of pressure. It's unclear if it's from the Palestinian resistance enforcement of those terms or other factors. What do we know and what can we say about where it is now?
Can I read Abu Abeda's statement in full? I have it here. It
Sure.
Be
Yeah,
clarifying.
that's a good idea.
So on Monday, he released a statement saying, during the past 3 weeks, the resistance leadership has monitored the enemy's violations and failure to abide by the terms of the agreement, from delaying the return of the displaced to the northern Gaza Strip, targeting them with shelling and gunfire in various areas of the Strip, and not allowing the entry of relief supplies in all the forms according to what was agreed upon, while the resistance has implemented all of its obligations. Accordingly, the handover of the Zionist captives who are scheduled to be released next Saturday, corresponding to 15 February 2025, will be postponed until further notice and until the occupation commits to and compensates for the entitlements of the past weeks retroactively. We affirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation commits to them. And then the Islamic resistance movement, the political branch, came out with a statement shortly after that said, we confirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation adheres to them. And this is the key part. We deliberately announced the postponement of the handover of the Israeli prisoners 5 full days before the date of the handover of the prisoners in order to give the mediators sufficient opportunity to pressure the occupation to implement its obligations, and the door is kept open to the implementing of the exchange on time if the occupation adheres to it. So that the 5 days was the key part of that, to say you have this amount of time before. I think that's an important thing to note.
That's great, and it's very helpful to hear that statement, John, because it really sets the stage. And that echoes also what Abu Ubaidah said in his video the day that the ceasefire went into effect, that Hamas is committed to the ceasefire and to the terms of the agreement as long as Israel is committed to them. In other words, they made clear from the very beginning that this is not going to be a one-sided agreement where Israel gets what it wants and Palestinians don't get anything. And I think we've all understood, and I'm thinking now of the scenes we saw when we were talking to Abubaker, or our conversation last week with Asa Winstanley, who is an engineer and a spokesperson of the Gaza municipality, that the greatest danger now for people in Gaza is to go back to the pre-October 7 pattern of death by siege and Israel keeping a chokehold on Gaza, which it still has, because a lot of the goods have to move in either through the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is between Gaza and Israel, or the Rafah crossing and the so-called Philadelphia route, which the Israelis have still not withdrawn from. So that's the danger. And I think that the calculation from Hamas was, we have to take a stand now, because if we compromise on this now, and remember, they didn't compromise on it during 15 months of genocidal bombing. Why would they compromise on it now during a ceasefire? So they called Israel's bluff. And what we saw during the week was these threats from Trump saying if all the hostages aren't released by noon on Saturday, then I can't remember the exact phrases he used, that all hell will break loose, and I think Israel's just going to go in and do whatever. They were raising the stakes so high, and then Netanyahu came out. Was it Tuesday or yesterday, and echoed Trump's statement, but left out, he didn't say all the hostages. He didn't say all the captives. He said, if they don't release our captives by noon. So giving the impression that Israel is going to go wild on Saturday or was tearing up the deal. And this was all being, cheer-led in mainstream media by just this echo chamber saying that of course Hamas is violating the deal. Hamas is violating the deal without paying any attention to Israel's violations. And I think one of the most egregious examples of that, Tamara, I'd like to show the tweet from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Did I give you that? I may not.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm looking at my notes. And so this was on February 11th. So this was on Tuesday. And he says, we must avoid at all costs resumption of hostilities in Gaza that would lead to immense tragedy. I appeal to Hamas to proceed with the planned liberation of hostages. Both sides must fully abide by their commitments in the ceasefire agreement and resume serious negotiations. So what do you get from this? From Antonio Guterres, you get the impression that Hamas is the side that is reneging on the deal, and Hamas is the one that needs to behave. And then you get this statement about both sides, which is very generic. There's nothing in there saying, I call on Israel to abide by the humanitarian annexes. So Guterres here, as many other commentators in media, are feeding the Israeli propaganda or the propaganda from the Israeli government and from Trump that Hamas is blowing up the deal. But what was actually happening, the truth we could get from a couple of sources. First of all, we have this article, and this was also on Tuesday, in Ma'ariv, the Israeli newspaper. This is one of the Israeli newspapers. And I'll just read a translation of that. They say the defense establishment and the IDF, the Israeli army, say that so far the terrorist organization, meaning Hamas, of course, has not violated the agreement, and therefore it is very doubtful whether Israel can take steps against Hamas at this stage. It is also estimated that Israel will first act with the mediators on the issue. So this tells us, first of all, the army is saying that the genocidal Israeli army is coming to the defense of Hamas and saying they haven't violated the agreement. We're on the ground. We don't see any violations. And there's a couple of reasons that they might be saying that. One, it's true. The other is that the army doesn't want to go back to war. And that's what they're signaling here. They're saying, we're not going back, at least not now. And then we have this buried deep in, and that was on February 11th, the Ma'ariv article. And then we have this one also on February 11th from the New York Times, an article headlined, Trump to meet Jordan's king as Gaza truce hangs in the balance. And buried deep down in the article, I mean, we're talking paragraphs deep, they say the current standoff stems partly from Hamas's accusation that Israel has not upheld its promises for the first phase of the ceasefire. Israel was required to send hundreds of thousands of tents into Gaza, a promise that Hamas says Israel has not kept. Speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter, 3 Israeli officials and 2 mediators said that Hamas's claims were accurate. I mean, that should be the headline of the story.
That's very
never.
It's
yeah, a little bit.
Way down. But not one Israeli official, 3 Israeli officials and 2 mediators said that Hamas's claims were accurate. So it's so shameful that the UN and so many others were so quick to blame the Palestinian side and effectively act. Antonio Guterres, effectively acting as Israel's attorney.
Yeah.
So
it's reflexive.
Let me read you the details of what's actually missing, because it's agreed to line by line and signed and guaranteed by the parties that are backing this. Of the 200,000 tents that were supposed to enter the Gaza Strip, 200,000, only 53,000 have entered. So there's 150,000 tents short in the middle of the storms that you so rightly pointed out are devastating. People's tents are destroyed. People moved from the south back to the north and left their tents that were destroyed in the south. The tents were supposed to be on day 1. They were supposed to come in. We're now day 26. None of the caravans, the 60,000 𝐓𝐡𝐞 trailers that people would live in, none of those 60,000 have been delivered. It was supposed to be 50 fuel trucks a day, which is critical to getting the infrastructure in Gaza up. It's getting the water desalination plants. It's getting
sewage pumps,
sewage pumps, the water pumps, all of it, on and on and on. Everything,
the heavy equipment, the earth moving equipment.
Yeah, so there's
hospitals
50 trucks supposed to come each day. Only 15 have entered daily. So 35 trucks of fuel each day, now day 26. That's piling up. 12,000 aid trucks should have entered the Gaza Strip by now. Only 8,500 have. That's a 3,500 truck shortage. 3,500 trucks. When we're talking about, the starvation levels that were inside of Gaza, this is a significant amount. And then the heavy equipment, this is the key. This is really the key. Only 4 pieces of heavy equipment have been allowed in. They're all, as Nora reported, stacked up on the Egyptian border, ready to come through Rafah at any point, or go around and go through Kerem Shalom if that's what Israel wants. So only 4 of 500 that were agreed to in the deal, signed by all the guarantors of the parties. Israel has not allowed the entry of building materials for reconstructions of the hospitals or civil defense. That was also supposed to come in on day 1. And the power plant has not yet been activated, and no equipment has been brought in to repair it and the electricity grid in Gaza. Those were both day 1 things as well. So these aren't things that were supposed to come day 21 and haven't by 26. This is 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks of this not happening. And that is a significant portion. It's not just dribs and drabs. That is a significant portion of each element of the deal that are being reneged upon.
And so which is all critical to actually moving Gaza. What we've heard in the past few days repeatedly from Trump and from Netanyahu is that they want to keep Gaza as unlivable as possible or make it even more unlivable. And so they have withholding this aid and equipment is essential to their plan for ethnic cleansing, for forced displacement. So the stakes could not have been higher for the resistance. And they took a stand, knowing that they could risk Israel restarting the war. That is a risk. Even if we say, well, the Israeli army is exhausted and the politically within Israel, the population doesn't want to go back to this war. You can list all those factors, but you can't rule out that Israel will still do it anyway. And Hamas took that risk. And it seems, it's still 2 days away from Saturday. And, each day is like a month in this period of history. But the indications are positive. And so we had some reporting from Reuters today that I think we can put up. We've had a couple of, these are just some of the news briefs that came out today from Haaretz and from Reuters. And one of them says that according to Palestinian sources who spoke with Haaretz, Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement over the next phase of the deal to take place this Saturday, in which 3 hostages will be released in accordance with the deal. Israel will increase the entry of aid into the strip, mainly consisting of tents, gas, and medical equipment. According to the sources, the entry of caravans, that's mobile homes, into Gaza depends on their production process in Egypt. And then from Reuters, mediators are exerting pressure for the deal to be fully implemented, ensure Israel abides by a humanitarian protocol, and resume exchanges of Israeli hostages held in Gaza, Palestinian prisoners. So it looks like it's heading in that direction. I think that if this is what happens, and I think everyone hopes this is what will happen, then that will have been an important test to show that the resistance is not going to back down in ceasefire times. I don't want to say peacetime. They're not going to back down in ceasefire times, just as they didn't back down during the battle. And in a sense, the future of Gaza depends on them being able to enforce this agreement to the letter.
Yeah. So assuming that the ceasefire holds and there is a prisoner exchange on Saturday, John, what do we know about the Israelis who are supposed to be exchanged, and what do we know about the Palestinian political prisoners who are supposed to be released?
They, as far as I know, unless it just happened, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 hasn't said the names. Normally, they would have said the names by now that are the next three, and then each of these phases are 75 prisoners from the West Bank, security prisoners that have life or long sentences, and 111. That's the number that they've come up with for the last three exchanges with people from Gaza to return to Gaza. And some of the people are being exiled, the life sentences. Some of them are exiled to Gaza. Some of them are exiled outside to neighboring countries. And that should be for the next 3 weeks. I believe that there is only 8 or 9 remaining alive captives. So I think that's part of the reason
Israeli captives.
Yeah, Israeli captives. That's part of the reason why 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is making this stand at this point, because they're running out of runway for this, and they're not. And they have been patient to wait it out till day 24 to even announce that they're doing this. But I think, not to speculate, and I think a lot of this, our audience will be watching this show after that. After we'll know if the prisoners were released. But the messaging that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 delivered is the purpose. Holding back the prisoners at this point, I don't expect that to be. I expect movement and seeing enough movement. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 doesn't want to violate the ceasefire, so they're honorable in following the ceasefire, and that has been the case for ceasefires dating back to 2003. But we'll see. It's 36 hours from now we'll know, and then in the time being,
we'll be following it very closely, as we have been the last 3 weeks of the ceasefire process. I think that's a good place to leave it. I want to take a look at our website. We have an enormous amount of absolutely spectacular features and analyses by our staff writers, features by our writers in Gaza, I just that story that I read during the news report obviously is one of those up there. I just want people to again go to our website and look at some of those stories. There's one by Abubaker about football players. So yeah.
When I look at the website, and I can't believe that we, and when I say we, I mean certainly not just us on this live stream. I mean the whole EI team, the features team, Maureen, Omar, Leah, Richard, Michael, David, all our colleagues who are doing this, but also all the writers who continue to report from Gaza. And you saw the information we got from Abubaker today, talking about what he's seeing in Gaza, what it's like, the contrasts between the destruction and markets coming back to life. That detail of life in Gaza, you are not really getting it from anywhere else. So you get that in all these incredible stories that our writers, our colleagues in Gaza are doing. And we're so proud to continue working with them. We are going to keep doing it. We're going to keep supporting them. And please, we ask you to keep supporting them by continuing to share their stories, to keep reading them, sharing them, make sure that they don't fade out of people's attention. And we're so grateful to everyone watching and everyone not watching who helps support this work, because we can't do it without you. And so just to say thank you, we can never say thank you enough to everyone for helping us at the Electronic Intifada to do the work we do. And we're very proud to do it.
We are. And I want to say thank you, of course, to Tamara Nassar for directing and producing this program. And of course, go check out her essential reporting on what's happening in the West Bank over at electronicintifada.net. Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, Michael Brown for fact-checking, Ellie Gerzon for social media. And on behalf of all of us, myself, Asa, Ali, and John, and Tamara, thank you, and we will see you next week.